Well, good morning, everyone. As Kerry said, we've been doing a series on spiritual journeys. So I'm interviewing Beth this morning, and here she is.
Hello.
The beautiful
Hi.
Beth. And I'm going to kick off by asking the most important question of the day, which is, if there was music played every time you walked into a room, what would it be?
That is a most important question. So I have a theme song. It's one that I discovered many, many years ago. No one else
gone into this song.
Well, it's a real song, but basically it's called Small is Tremendous. So if you don't know me, I'm 5'1.5". The half is very important. And I just think that being small is tremendous. It's wonderful. Even though I can't reach the top of my kitchen cabinets, I have to climb on the side. And even though I will never be a model unless it's for children's clothes, I think small is tremendous. And my grandmother was actually smaller than me. And so this was kind of our little secret theme song that was called Small is Tremendous. And so that would be my song. It's like, small is tremendous. Yeah. But yeah, it's just a jolly little
So,
little
Adam,
song.
if we could get that set up for every Sunday morning, that would be great. Thanks. Fabulous. I love that. Thank you. So, Beth, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, so hello. Many of you will know me, but many of you won't. So my name is Beth. I am married to Adam, who is the co-leader here at River Church. We've been married for 6 years.
I had to remind her that she'd been married for 6 years.
I thought it was
she'd been married the
longer.
same amount of time. To different people.
Yes. So we've been married for 6 years, and we have one gorgeous son who is called Isaac, who is 1 year and 3 months, I believe. But I lost track.
You're correct.
Okay, excellent.
Great. I love Isaac. He's fab. And we love you guys in our church and in our family. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you found your journey in pregnancy and the beginning of like your birth and the beginning of motherhood, and how did you find all of that?
Yeah, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. I'm going to talk about kind of growing up first. So
yeah, do that.
Thank you. So I grew up in a Christian family. My dad was actually a pastor of a church. I thought I'd married as far away from a pastor as I possibly could with this man. He was a sound engineer. He didn't ever want to be at the front of church, and then God had other ideas. So I was a little bit cross about that. Just kidding. But yes, I grew up in a Christian family. I feel like I've known God my whole life. A lot of my jobs over the years have been quite faith-centred or God-centred, so I've worked for multiple churches. I've worked for a Christian charity called the Trussell Trust that does a lot in the UK with food poverty. I've worked for Salt Mine Theatre Company, which is a Christian theatre company. That's where Adam and I met. So that's kind of been a big part of my life growing up all the way through. Obviously got married to Adam, we moved here, and then I started work. So I actually work for River Church. I'm the head of children's and families work. Sorry, I used to be the head of youth and children's, and now it's children and families work. And yeah, then I got pregnant with Isaac, and pregnancy was just really fun. I really enjoyed napping a lot and eating a lot, and that being completely guilt-free. Birth wasn't potentially as smooth as I was hoping. We ended up having to have a emergency C-section, if that makes sense. So he just wasn't coming out, and they were like, there's no other way.
It was like long, wasn't it?
It was like 56.5-hour labour, then a C-section. So it was a long one. And to be honest, I found that a little bit traumatic because that wasn't quite how I pictured it. And then, of course, there's the recovery from a C-section. And then you had this tiny human who you never realised that you had this much love in you for. But equally, it's like, this is terrifying.
And having had a 56-hour labour followed by, oh my gosh, I'm in charge of this person.
Yes, it was both wonderful and terrifying, and it's one of the best experiences of my life, and also one of the hardest experiences of my life. And for me, early motherhood, yeah, it's this weird balance of wonderful and awful. I really, really struggled with energy, so I knew that becoming a parent was like, okay, this is tiring. But I felt physically empty. I felt like my bones were hollow. I felt like my veins were empty. I'd sleep and I'd wake up and be like, it's like I've not slept at all. I didn't know at the time, but I had some issues with my thyroid. So I had underactive thyroid, which was a massive part of that. But I just thought, this is motherhood forever. And I was like, oh, I really love him, but can I give him back? Which is a terrible thing to think. You know, you're kind of like, I don't think I should be feeling this way. And I cannot imagine my life without him. And I love him so much. But I just was like, I don't know if I can cope if this is the rest of my life, feeling this empty. And so that, you know, I was too tired to meet up with people. I just didn't want to get dressed most mornings. I ended up feeling quite isolated and quite lonely in those early months, which I think is a fairly common thing actually with mothers that doesn't necessarily get talked about. But yeah, I felt like I was in quite an extreme version of that and was just, ugh.
Yeah, and it can be quite hard, can't it? Once the initial adrenaline runs out, you got about 2 or 3 weeks of it, haven't you? And then it's like, oh, this is even harder now. But especially with your thyroid issues, I can see that has been a particularly hard thing for you. Would you say that experience in that time of your life, did that affect you spiritually at that time?
Yeah, so I think often, for me, certainly the physical and the spiritual tend to match up quite well. So where I felt physically empty, I also felt pretty spiritually empty. I was a little bit just kind of numb. And I guess I would describe it that I was in a bit of a spiritual desert. You know, it was really dry. There wasn't much life. I'd come to church, but I was just so exhausted. I was like, I could be asleep now. And I didn't connect with God. I didn't feel God's presence in the way that I have, you know, throughout most of my life. And I really recently started to think about this desert, and I thought, you know what? I didn't just wake up one day having crash landed in a desert. You know, it wasn't just one day in an oasis and the next day, oh, it's all dry and deserty. Actually, I realised that I'd walked there over quite a number of years, even before pregnancy, even before having Isaac. I'd walked there very slowly, almost not aware that I was, you know, letting things slip and letting things go. Now, as I said, I grew up in a Christian family, and it was very much impressed upon me the importance of daily Bible reading, daily time with God, personal worship, personal prayer, all these things, which are absolutely wonderful and so important. But I have always been really pants at doing those things. Really pants.
Yeah, as an extrovert, I hear that. Yeah. I'm like, go and sit on your own with God. And I'm like, but I want to be with the people.
Yeah. So difficult. And so that had always been a kind of source of guilt and shame that, you know, I was a pastor's daughter and I said I was a Christian, but actually how much was I good at doing these things? And it always just for years and years and years had been a kind of a sense of guilt and shame. And I think because a lot of my jobs growing up had been faith-based. So, you know, I'd go to work and we would do group Bible study together. I was like, great, that's the Bible study tick done. You know, we'd be like, we're going to have worship at lunchtime. Great, that's the worship tick done. So I'd never cultivated these practices in my own life on my own, which meant that these kind of, I call them kind of daily rhythms or that sort of thing. And because I'd never done that, when I then went on maternity leave, I was suddenly like, oh, I don't have daily prayer in my schedule. No one's telling me now's your time to let's pray for this. And oh no, actually no one's going to do my thought for the day for me. And so suddenly I was on my own, feeling in a complete desert. And I describe it as a bit like a muscle. You know, you need to practice these things and get used to them, otherwise you get flabby. And so I got a flabby faith. It was a little bit like, ooh, a little bit out of shape. Enter motherhood. And I think, like I said, it wasn't because of motherhood that I was in a desert, but motherhood and all the things that I was going through allowed me to see, actually, this is where I was at, and realise kind of where I was. And I felt a bit lost. God had always felt really close to me, always. You know, I prayed to him, I heard his voice, I'd seen him do miracles and amazing things. And suddenly I had this baby and I was absolutely exhausted. And I was like, God, I need some sleep. I need to get some energy. And my son had some really difficult tummy issues in the night, which meant he just did not sleep ever. And it was like, God, where are you? You know, I'm crying out to him, asking you for healing for my son, and you're not answering me. Oh dear. And you know, I'm praying and I just feel like they're just bouncing back off the ceiling. And I realise I've lived a very privileged life and I've never had any major horrible things go on in my life. So this was the first time that I was like, God, I really need you. And where are you? You know, you've just gone, I'm off, see ya. And sorry, I wasn't going to cry. Oh, pants. But looking back now, I absolutely know that he did not abandon me. I absolutely know that he was there with me. But in that moment, thank you. In that moment, I was like, God, where are you? I need you. I need you now more than ever. And you're not here. And you're not helping my son, who I love so much and is in so much pain. And yeah, that was really hard.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's such a hard time. Like, unanswered prayer is such a topic that so many people I know have come into contact with. Like, why aren't you answering these prayers? Like, I'm crying out to you, and you promise that you'll answer when we call, and you'll promise that when we knock, you'll answer. And like, where are you in this situation? And it's so hard. And like, you talked about being in the spiritual desert, and that's something that so many people go through, and like, people have written books about it, like John Mark Comer talks about it, Dallas Willard and people like that spiritual desert is such a known experience, isn't it? And when it's you, it kind of just feels so empty, and like you're like alone in the universe, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you feel that that's somewhere that you're potentially still in your spiritual desert, or do you feel like you're out of it, or where do you feel like you are on that journey now?
Yeah, so for any parents, mothers, fathers, parents in general, there is hope. I promise you don't stay in that place forever. There is light, and it's not a train. Yeah, so there is, there is hope. My son's stomach problems did sort themselves out, and he's still not the best sleeper in the world, but he sleeps and I sleep, and I'm now, I'm now discovered there's a thyroid issue, and I'm on medication, which has actually helped me to feel alive and be able to engage with my son and all these things. But I think for me, the hardest thing was there was a lot of stuff going on physically, but the spiritual thing, because I was like, God, I've been connected to you to my whole life, and now I just feel, like we said, in the desert on my own. And I think the first step for me was realising that's where I was at, because I think so often we can wander into that desert and not even realise we're there. And we're like, oh, this is weird. Why am I not hearing God? And we just don't realise that's the place that we're at. So for me, realising that I was in a desert was the first step. And I'm definitely not still there anymore. I'm very much on my way out. I can see the oasis in front of me, and I'm already experiencing God's richness and goodness and that connection with him again that I was missing. But yes, I still don't have a lot of energy. I'm still a mother, and I still have a son who doesn't love to sleep. He was up for an hour and a half last night, and I was like, really? Not tonight, but hey ho. But I've really discovered that it doesn't have to be an hour of daily prayer, an hour of daily worship, or all these things that I'd grown up being told are really important. They are really important things, but they're not supposed to be a source of guilt and shame. And for me at the moment, it's about meeting God in the little moments. So I don't have an hour to spend reading my Bible. I barely have sometimes 5 minutes. This morning, I actually put on the Lectio 365 app, which is a great app if anyone hasn't got it, which I haven't done for a while because it's 5 minutes of continual listening to something. And I was like, oh, 5 minutes, that might be a bit much, which is a sad state of life, isn't it? But I did it while I was feeding Isaac his breakfast. And this morning, actually, there was a Bible verse in this app. So it's basically like a daily kind of devotional thing you can listen to, and there's moments of silence and prayer and that sort of thing. And there was a Bible verse which was from Matthew chapter 11, 28 to 30. And it says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you." So it's talking about the yoke, like cattle, they have a yoke over their shoulders when they're ploughing a field. It says, take my yoke upon you. Huh?
Not the centre of an egg.
Not the centre of an egg, no. Take my yoke upon you, because my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And there's a different translation on the actual app, so I took a screenshot, and it says this. It says, "Are you tired? Worn out? Yes. Burned out on religion?" Actually, yes, that's probably where I'd got to as well. "Come to me. Get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly." And I think for me, I'd allowed these wonderful things that God's given us. So the Bible is so rich, and there is so much wonderful. It's his word, and it's so wonderful. But I'd allowed that to become heavy and a source of guilt and shame because I didn't read enough of it. And like prayer and spending time with him, I'd allowed that to become heavy. And God goes, I don't want to give you things that are heavy. My yoke is easy and my burden is light, and I want you to live lightly. I don't want things to be heavy and hard. And so I'm really learning at the moment that I don't have a lot of time to give, but it's in the small moments. It's in the small encounters with God. And he's released me actually from that shame of not doing a daily Bible reading, a Bible study, a daily personal worship, prayer. And I do those things actually now as I go about my daily life. So as I'm taking the dog for a walk, the buggy and the dog in two different directions, actually I'm just chatting with God and saying, God, this is what's going on, and I'd love to pray for this person that I know, and just chatting with him as I go about my daily life. And things like podcasts are wonderful. The Bible, there's a Bible app that has David Suchet reading to you. What more could you possibly want?
Oh, his velvety tones.
Poirot. Who else? You want Poirot to read you the Bible if you can. Listening to things like that, and listening to audiobooks and things like that. But he's just really reminding me that we're not saved by how much we pray, or read the Bible, or worship, or serve. Those things are absolutely wonderful. And I can't wait to get back to a season in my life where I can do all those things in abundance. But for right now, I'm not in that season where I have all this time and all this energy. It's enough in this season to just sit with Jesus and just to be with him.
Yeah, and I think like what you were saying about not being saved by what we do, like Jesus has already saved us. And these things are to give us life, to enjoy those things, because he's already saved us. And so if they're not giving you life, then they shouldn't be a source of shame and guilt. I've listened to quite a lot of John Mark Comer recently, and one of the things I absolutely loved as a parent myself, him saying, I think he was quoting Dallas Willard, so I'm quoting a quote. So basically, he said you can be two places at the same time. You can be washing the dishes and in the presence of God. You can be playing with your children and in the presence of God. And I think as a parent, that is so true, isn't it? It's like, okay, I'm going to do this jigsaw puzzle for half an hour because you can't get that one piece in, but I'll be in the presence of God as well. And I'm enjoying my children and in the presence of God. And just snatching those little moments is so important, isn't it? New question. What is something at the moment for you then that's a source of joy in your motherhood journey?
So I think just getting to watch Isaac grow. He's a really sweet kid. He's so smiley and so happy all the time, apart from in the middle of the night, but all the time. And I just love realizing how I feel for him as a parent for a child makes me understand more how God feels about me as his child. And I don't know, beforehand I thought I understood that, I thought I knew that, but it's really kind of come into its own now that I am a mother, and I go, wow, I would do anything for you. I would move a mountain for you. And that is how God feels about me. And, it doesn't matter what he's like, if he's good or bad, I still love him. And that's the same for God with us. Of course, he wants us to do the things that he's asked us because he knows they're good for us and that they're going to help us. But he loves us anyway, regardless, always. And so it's been a joy to watch Isaac grow and develop, and also understand that kind of from God as well.
Yeah. And I love the verse in the Bible that says, if you know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more does God give good things to us? And so I feel absolutely the same about my children. I would do anything for them. And if I would do anything for them and I love them so unconditionally, how much more does God love us as his children? And that is just so wonderful to come into more of a fullness of knowing that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm so pleased that in the last 9 or 10 months that you've been able to enjoy the fullness of motherhood and your beautiful, gorgeous son who I just could squidge. And we've talked about how intense the challenges can be, but we've also talked about how intense the joy can be. And that is just so wonderful. And I just so appreciate how open you've been with us today. So thank you so much. We're going to go into a time where we have a couple of questions to ponder on after what we've heard from Beth and the wisdom and the openness that she shared with us. And I'm going to pass back to Kerry for that. So thank you so much. Thanks, Beth.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nay. That was beautiful interviewing. And Beth, thank you so much for being vulnerable and open. And when we are that with one another, I think it's really precious. You know, our lives are full of different extremes, and we can just focus and wear a bit of a mask of everything's fine, when actually we get to truly know one another and know God when we hear things like that. So Beth, thank you so much. I knew you'd cry. I know you said, right, it's going to happen. As Nay said, we've got 3 questions up there that we'd love to just spend a little bit of time pondering. I'd like to invite you to maybe turn to the person next to you, or maybe in threes, just take one of those, any of them, chat them through, we've got about 5 minutes or so to do that. If you want to just sit quietly on your own, please feel free to do that. But we just want this time to be a time when we can kind of process a bit for ourselves what we might have heard. So feel free to sit quietly, prayer place. Please process it with Steve, Fiona at the back if you'd like some prayer. But for now, we'll just take 5 minutes and just invite you to chat and maybe pray for one another, just as you see fit. And I'll come back up and lead us to the end of our service.